Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for the media in particular, for your patience. I know you were downstairs this morning, but as I indicated when I came in, that I would speak to you at the end of my engagement. I want to thank my press secretary for reporting to the country last night that I would have been meeting with all of the stakeholders. Today we've had the benefit of having meetings with the privately owned PSVs, the Transport Board, the Transport Authority, the Barbados Workers Union, and indeed the Ministry of Public Works and Transport. I do not relish having to speak in these terms because I have one interest and one interest alone, and that is the commuters of Barbados. On the Sunday before Cabinet was sworn in, I made it clear that if I have to speak harshly, I will speak harshly in defense of the people of this country. I am upset with what has transpired on a number of fronts. And on Monday morning, when I could not be in the country, obviously because I was away, I asked two of my ministers, Cynthia Ford and Kay McConney, to go and visit the bus terminals and to interact with the commuters of this country to make sure that things were going smoothly. I was horrified at the report which they brought back to me, which relates not just to, and in fact most of it relates to, one, the conditions of the terminals, and two, the inability to communicate with the commuters, and three, the absence continually of buses. I have said, and the Transport Board knows that I've said this over and over, Barbados has too many buses. The last government effectively privatized the transport system in this country, and it cannot be that we are operating two different systems and the commuters suffering in the interim. I want to thank everyone here today for recognizing that there's one interest and one interest alone, and that is that of the commuters, and that we are not going to run a situation that does not take into account that we have inherited a situation where, give me the document there please, where for the better part, in fact not the better part, for more than a decade, not a single bus was bought in Barbados, not one, by the Transport Board. And we had a set of people who were more concerned with BMW X5s than in the purchasing of buses. We had people who were prepared to run UCAL's debt up to over $20 million, and instead of paying UCAL the debt that it owes, they instead brought in people from Trinidad to fix what buses I don't know, and Ms. Sue and the Transport Board are yet to show me the record of the buses that were supposed to have been fixed. The bottom line is I can't hold my current board accountable for the fact that no buses were bought for 10 years. I can't hold them accountable for the fact that UCAL was not paid for the better part of 10 years and that the debt owing to them is $20 million. I can't hold them accountable for the fact that we brought in Trinidad mechanics and we bought all kinds of spare parts on credit cards of known and not known sources. But I can hold them accountable for the condition of the terminal. And I can hold them accountable for the failure to communicate with the commuters. And I've made it absolutely clear this morning that Barbados cannot operate with that sense of callousness with respect to what conditions people have to wait in and what we are going to do to minimize their capacity, their need to wait. We have in this country almost, I am told, 735 routed vehicles between ZRs and Bs alone. We have another 138 BTs, and we have another 900 odd ZMs. And then we have what the Transport Board has. And the bottom line is that what was essentially left at 270 buses hovers anywhere between 50 and 80 buses. Now that is unacceptable. And therefore, my government will ensure that there is a national approach to the delivery of public transport in Barbados immediately. I'm happy that the representatives of the privately owned PSVs also recognize that in the same spirit that we agreed and accepted that there was need for an increase in bus fares, and on the increase, I want to make this now a document that goes on this page in particular, because those who are part and parcel of the atmospheric noise in this country seem to have a short memory and seem to forget that in 2016, all things being equal, this meant that the estimated cost per passenger, in 2014 should be $5.40. Now, my government saw this document and rejected it out of hand. And we agreed that there would have to be a shared burden approach towards the cost of public transport. When we met, Mr. Linton, with yourself and all of the other privately owned PSV owners, you made a clear case for $3.50 with some stipulations which we will come back to in terms of a smoothly functioning system. Barbados is now too old a country, too mature a country, for us not to have a sensible approach to the delivery of public transport in Barbados. And I'm not going to do so at the expense of the workers, I'm not going to do so at the expense of the commuters, and I'm not going to do so at the expense of the PSV owners. There has to be a common space in the middle, and I believe that we have found it. We have agreed that the Transport Board, the Transport Authority, and the privately owned PSVs and the Ministry will work to be able to better refine the routes and to make sure that the what we call the rebuttable presumption of the 270 buses needed to more than adequately service the routes is the objective to which we have to reach within the next 2 months or so. Similarly, we are going to use an approach that calls not just on what government owns, but also the wider ownership of vehicles across those 4 categories to which I referred just now, and that those persons will work under a decal branded bus that will be Transport Board branded, but does not require them to go and paint a bus in blue and yellow, because nobody has money in this environment to go and paint, especially when the majority of the buses in any event need to be renewed, and we're going to treat to the question of fleet renewal separately. We've also agreed that as of this week, immediately, the terminals are to be kept clean and also to be beautified. It cannot be that we treat our people in the manner in which we are treating them. I'm not going to agree to it at all. But we've also had raised in here other issues pertaining to the functioning of the Constitution River Terminal, for example, which the providers have said does not adequately function effectively after 7 p.m. at night for all kinds of reasons. And therefore a working group that is looking just purely at the functioning of the terminals with the privately owned PSVs and the Transport Board and the authority will be established to put us in the best position to be able to change how we treat to our public spaces. And this is a conversation. Members may forget that last month I said the same thing with respect to our school plant, and with the bathrooms in our school plant, and with the public corridors in our school plant. We have to lift up the environment within which we are living and to allow people to know this is how we want our public spaces to be treated, and this is how we will treat to them. And we can't do it for one set of people and leave it out for the other set of people. No. We've also agreed that in some instances that I've listened carefully to the pleas of my 2 ministers who have gone and interacted on the last 2 days with people across all the terminals, and that there's a clear case for us to be able to ensure that the mass discount is available at all levels, so that if you are going to buy 10 tickets or the larger amount, whatever it is, that the discount will now be, for volume discount, will be $3, so that you literally have $30 will get you the 10, rather than the fare that you would have been paying at $3.20. So that effectively $3 will be the price for all who are buying in bulk, regardless of whether it is 10 or 20 or 40. And finally, that with respect to the school children, given the fact that we are in the process of amplifying the transport board's provision of vehicles, and that the transport board more and more will be a brand as opposed to literally the owner of vehicles, that we will work to be able to ensure that the privately owned PSVs have agreed that they will not charge school children more than $2.50. In the case of the transport board buses, that $2.50 obviously is paid by government. In the case of the PSVs that are privately owned, not working under the transport board brand, then the school child will pay $2.50. But there is still the obligation on us to have as many buses operating under the transport board brand such that the school children don't have to pay anything at all. And that is what we're working towards. With respect to the full fleet and government's acquisition, government is not acquiring buses, but government will be working with people who are acquiring buses. That is the basis for the last tender. We've also agreed that a percentage of no less than 120 of the 270 buses, not percentage, a number of 120 of the 270 buses that have to operate will be reserved for the workers of the transport board to own either through private partnerships with other people, or on their own through UCAL or any other entity that they want to own it in. But there is no way we can extend an opportunity to privately owned PSVs without extending the opportunity of ownership to the people who have worked at the transport board all through the years. And that is what the government is going to do to help resolve the crisis. We have not finished all the discussions today, because what is required now is the fine detail work of which routes and which owned vehicles can come, and the settlement of the contract, which is, I believe, a draft is now available. Yes. And everyone will continue to meet over the next few days, because I don't think it'll finish tomorrow. Again, we're conscious that this is a long weekend, but we want that still from Tuesday, when the long weekend is over, that we start with considerably more buses, and we will let the public know the rollout as to what has been agreed over the next few days with the privately owned PSVs under the Transport Board brand and under a contract that makes sense. We've also agreed here today that we will continue, and rather than look at 3 strikes to expulsion, that we will look at suspension, and then from suspension to expulsion, in order to be able to maintain order, and that we will also require GPSs to be put on every single bus, transport board and privately owned buses, in order to make sure that you minimize the chances of people going off route, and that the transport authority and the owners are in a position to be able to monitor where the buses are in order to bring the order. I think I can say that all of the stakeholders agreed that we want a quality, affordable, safe public transport system, and that there is no siloed perspective that is transport government owned or private government owned or workers as opposed to management, and that space in the middle here that we are creating for that affordable, safe, reliable transport system for the entire country is what matters, and that we are going to go there, and that we are going to do it step by step. We've also recognized that the terminals create opportunities for public-private partnerships in order to be able to improve them. The last time that terminal at Fairchild Street was built when Vic Johnson was Minister of Transport in the 1980s. I was at school then. It needs upgrading. But government doesn't have the luxury, given its fiscal circumstances, to do things on its own. and therefore we will be working with ordinary Barbadians to be able to expand ownership opportunities, whether it is in the provision of the bus services as we have just announced, or whether it is going to be in partnership for improving the bus terminals with respect to solar photovoltaic panels and power purchase agreements that we can do jointly that will allow us to upgrade the quality of terminal, as well as at the same time earn some money to be able to keep the terminals in good shape as we go forward. So bottom line, that I am here not to defend the board, and the board has certainly not been defended by me this morning. I am here not to defend the privately owned PSVs. They are more than capable of defending themselves. The General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union is absolutely capable of defending the workers, and the managers are absolutely capable of defending themselves if they have not been accountable. I am here to defend the commuters of Barbados, and I ask the simple question: if we don't do it now, who will? And the bottom line is that if it means I'm going to have to meet with this group of people once every 3-4 weeks until we get it where we have to get it, then we will meet once every 3-4 weeks. But let us not forget that no buses were bought in the last 10 years. And let us not forget that men were consumed with BMW X5s rather than, what's the name of the buses? Leyland and Mercedes and Marco Polo buses. Those words weren't coming out the mouths of people. And let us not forget that we had men consume more with recovering what their credit cards bought for spare parts at the transport board, rather than making sure that the spare parts that were bought found themselves into functioning buses. And I've also issued one other injunction. This thing about derelict buses being kept all about the country. If the buses are not working, board them and get rid of them. But what cannot happen is that the transport board becomes a perfect picture of a derelict site that is not working towards caring for people. And you know, I've inherited a government that is what it is. That debt was unsustainable. That we've had to make some difficult decisions. And I will never shy away from the difficult decisions. But I ask myself, what is required to be fair? There are some decisions that we've made here today that the privately owned PSVs have put on the table, and we've accepted them as fair. There are other things where we've said it is a bridge too far for us to go, and that we will continue to make the owners accountable, but we accept that there has to be some other things put in place as well in making people accountable. Equally, we accept that the transport board has to be far more capable of communication. Nobody can tell you that busing a breakdown, but there's nobody holding your tongue. You can't have a bus terminal where people sitting down waiting for hours and nobody don't know whether the bus coming, going, or never coming. And that people have to open their mouths and speak to people and give people the chance to be able to pick up the phone and beg somebody to come for them, or go across the road to the ZR, or to plan out their lives. But this insensitive nonsense of just not saying nothing and then putting them to stay in somewhere. Mercifully, I'm told that by the two ministers that these things are capable of resolution, and that the average commuter out there has been reasonable, and that people expect that yes, there would have had to have been an increase, because there is no other commodity in Barbados that has only gone up by 50 cents in 30 years. And the privately owned PSVs will tell you that for them, that was the minimum that they needed to go. But you all can have a copy of this document from under the last government showing that the costs then, and we haven't done a revised cost in this day because it's almost a nonsense to do it because I know what I have to carry. But then it was $5.40. So that we have not even gone to anywhere near halfway. Because from 2 to 5.40 is $3.40. And we didn't even go halfway with the increase. By the same token, we went where we went because we recognize that tourists or one-off people might do a one-off ride at $3.50, but any properly functioning transport system must have volume discount, and that the volume discount would bring you in at the $3. And I accept that instead of going perhaps to the $3.20, that just go to the $3. And I've heard the people, and I've accepted that. But by the same token, for school children, that $2.50, and for those who obviously travel on the transport board branded buses, be it the blue and yellow or the new decals that we will have on the buses, then you pay nothing. Nothing. Because the government is paying. And then we do the accounting with the privately owned PSVs for those people that they would have taken who are pensioners, who are police, or who are school children. And that I've assured them their concern is cash flow, and I hear them. And I've said to the transport board, you have to manage your cash flow in such a way as to be able to make sure that these people are paid. Okay? Are there any quick questions? I'm not going to address the details of my trip today. I'm going to call you all back tomorrow to do that, because this issue is too important for me to diffuse it with anything else. Are there any questions on this issue?
Just to review us your ideas in terms of this new branded buses, classic transport buses.
I don't advise myself, but Ms. Boyce from the Transport Board has indicated that there are 78 major routes, and to get the level of regularity that they need, we're going to go with what I call at law, what I've been told is a rebuttable presumption. In other words, this is what we're using for initial planning, but on a parallel track, we have all of the route people and the fleet people looking at it and know that that number of 270 may vary, but for now we need something to plan. And with that 270, we may not get there immediately. We have to wait until the privately owned PSV operators come back to us and tell us how many buses they can use to add to the fleet that we currently have. I'm told that the Transport Board is waiting for parts to come in by early May, end of May, and that will also increase the numbers that they will have appreciably to up to about, what, 80, 90? So that between the two, we're not going to get there overnight. Look, I used a phrase in the budget that was not by accident, because this is a process. Almost every area of this country's infrastructure has been broken down in the last decade. And the other point I want to say is this, is that even when the buses start to come in, neither the private people nor government can go and get no bus off of the shelf. Nobody keeps buses for you to come and buy just so, like a car. You have to order the buses, and they have to be manufactured to the order. And that invariably you're talking about 6 to 9 months for the larger buses. The smaller ones you probably get way in a quicker time. So that's partially what we're up against. But I know this. What's the phrase that I use all the time? Many hands
make light work.
Make light work. Barbados has more than enough buses collectively to carry people to work. Those people who are concerned about order and cleanliness, we hear you, both not just at the terminals, but in the buses themselves, public and privately owned. And we are going to hold people accountable for vandalism in buses too, because that's the only way we are going to stop it from happening. The chairman of the Transport Authority told me there was a schoolboy who was found to have been guilty for vandalizing one of the buses, and his penalty was to go and have to clean buses at the Transport Board as community service. Now perhaps more of the country needs to be told when these things happen, so that people know that there are consequences to their behavior that will lead to either the vandalism or defecation of property, whether it is moving property in the form of a bus or the terminals in the areas where other parts of the public. And by terminals I mean all terminals. And the notion that we are going to have terminals that are for Transport Board and for privately owned, we need to move away from that. What Bajans want, that we want simply buses to run to time and run to route. Bajans want buses to run to time and run to route. And that they want to know that if they got to wait, that where they're waiting is pleasant enough that they can sit down without being affected, that if they have to relieve themselves, they can go to a public bathroom facility that is clean and that they can have access to water or to whatever while they're waiting. And I said to the transport board, if you know you are discomforting somebody, give them the water. But if you go in a store and you're the store owner and you're discomforting somebody, you don't reach out to the customer to see how you can ease the wait. Why should the transport board be any different? So that I hope that the message has gone clear. Today is Good Friday. I hope that there's no need for any further crucifixions as we go forward. But that the message be very, very clear as to what this government, not today, this week is Good Friday. It may well have been a Freudian slip. But bottom line is that let's pause and get it right. This is not an exam where you're looking for people looking for 100% or 90%. This is people's lives. And let's treat to them like they matter, because these are our parents, our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, our employees, our friends. And Barbados is too small for us to tolerate this kind of standard from anybody. I'm sorry that it has reached this way, but I'm happy that these two ladies to my left have been able to go and do the extensive touring. I would have gone myself, as you know, I've done in the past, and I may still go on occasion in the future, because the Lord is a living God, and we are not going to tolerate that kind of unsanitary condition or that lack of communication, even as we seek to face and fix what is a difficult situation that we inherited. We can do better, and we shall do better. Thank you.